who face eternity easily forget what a lifetime means, what an ending means.
You know it doesn't have to be this way.
No, Kunavang, it does. They need me.
Welcome, End of Dragons Daily 85. Today, the footage in the background is going to be dungeons and possibly some other stuff. Mostly, I've been doing this and PvP the past couple of days. I really want to get my arc to look good. In fact, I've improved it a lot further than even what you've seen right now. I think tomorrow you'll see some Dragon Bash footage. The topic today, though, is actually something really interesting. This has been a weird video. Almost, I didn't make it an End of Dragons Daily, but I made a commitment to myself earlier in the year that even regular news I would do in this format and hopefully just encourage people to watch this format. I could have typed this video title out as not End of Dragons Daily and maybe more people would have been interested in it, but we're looking pretty much exclusively at this new art that seems to be an elite specialization teaser today. And I'll tell you what, guys, it's been really hard to get comments for this, not because there aren't many comments, not because the comments are bad, but because everyone who's come up with an idea about it then goes onto an epic wall of text that covers like a ton of other ideas all at once. And you know, I could almost just pull one comment and get all of the discussion out of it. So I'm trying to like be very picky and choosy so that we can slowly break through the topics as we go. So first of all, let me just do a little bit of an introduction for you guys so that we all understand the situation. Before Guild Wars 2 came out, they announced the professions to us slowly, and what they did was right before the actual profession reveal, they gave us a black, dark silhouette of a character that we all pondered about, and then maybe a week or two later, we got the full concept art of what it was, and then it turned out, oh, it's a Guardian, and then they'd give us all the information about the Guardian, or oh, it's an Elementalist or something. And eventually, all these silhouettes, they were given to us in a big image, all lined up next to one another, and they all kind of ungrayed until we saw the original profession roster, which you can still see to this day on the main website there. That you can see that there's 8 characters there. The Revenant isn't included. With Heart of Thorns, they kind of dropped the ball. They didn't really do it that way. As good as the Heart of Thorns press and stuff was, you know, they were finding their feet. They did like a couple of trailers for some of them, and then the rest of them didn't get trailers. Eventually, there kind of was some official concept art, and it's this piece here. The format wasn't exactly the same with the whole graying out thing, though. And then with POF, they kind of did it again. By the way, you'll notice on these images, they're dumping the Revenant on the right now. And you can see the lineup of the Path of Fire elite specs. So this is all official art, and presumably End of Dragons will get the same thing. And it looks like, just as they did with Core, again, we are getting the silhouette here. So that is what I believe it is. I think it could be double. This is both about introducing a new character and about an elite specialization. But I think what really tips me off is this is a spec thing, is the art style is so similar to what we used to have. And also it's the color. You know, that pink to me screams Mesmer, and it screams that this is profession art of some kind. I think if they were teasing a character, well, we would just get the full... I mean, they already did that, right? They did that around Christmas. We had a character tease, which was this lady here, and they didn't mess about with any other shenanigans. So I think that we're looking at Elite Spec, and I actually think what really strikes me about this is... it's not the weapon. I actually think that we're seeing the Elite Specs mechanic on screen as well at the same time. So, yeah, that's really what I believe is Elite Spec, and I do believe it's a Mesmer too. Now, I don't have any comments for this either. Some of you guys think that it might be like an Ellie, because it's not the right kind of pink or something. But look, I think, as one of you expressed very well, each profession is very precisely color-coded in this game, and they are very recognizable. That is a box that I don't think Elite Spec should really be breaking out of. I've seen some people say that they should, but it's just going to be weird, guys. It's not going to... that's not the kind of fun boundary that they should be crossing, I don't think. And, you know, even in terms of just the aesthetic of having a main hand weapon that looks all green with an offhand weapon on the Guardian, which looks all blue, it's just strange. So I think it's a Mesmer. I think it's an Elite Spec thing. However, it could be doubled up as a character too. Great idea here. Several of you guys had it. Anthony Martin, I'm going with, says, so I'm going to go out on a really shaky limb and say that I think the image is a descendant of Shiro and is the main villain of End of Dragons. So, I don't know about the idea of the descendant of Shiro being a villain for End of Dragons. I don't think they need to be in that box. But the idea that they could be a prominent character, I'm really on board with. The whole Kosan thing in POF, and talking about like a lineage of Kos, was unexpected and really fun way to tie the new stuff into the old stuff. Turned out very quickly in the next Living World episode, Kos himself was around as an Awakened, so that kind of clouds it out a little bit and makes it feel like the whole Kosan thing doesn't get to shine. But I really like what they did there, and I think they could totally do that. If not just with a Shiro descendant, a descendant of anyone that we knew back then, and that could be a really fun character to run for. I don't know whether... Again, they need to be a villain, and I want to be clear that as far as I can remember in the lore, there was never any statement that Shiro had children, but it's not necessarily something they couldn't say. He had a whole life and a lot of, prestige and renown. In fact, he was quite famous, so I think having a kid wouldn't necessarily be a problem for him. And I think it's a fun idea for sure. Next, we've got Jesse, who says, at first I thought it was this is really the big topic here, okay? At first I thought the Mesmer was holding a dagger, but if you look closely, you can see the very end of a spear shaft pointing out from behind their left arm. The finger-like protrusions near the left hand appear to be ribbons tied to the end of a spear. So, I mean, what more can I say that the community hasn't already said? Let's go over the idea. What are they holding? Obviously, the addition of a new weapon is, for most people, one of the most exciting elements of an Elite Spec. To me, on immediate look, I think it's a dagger. Just that's the first thing I think most people would say. There was a bit of a discussion, I think, in the early hours about this maybe being a sword. Because it's too long to be a dagger. But don't forget, this is Guild Wars 2 at this point. Basically, every dagger we have is very long. It's, as I learned from the game Elder Scrolls Arena recently, kind of what we'd call it a tanto, right? It's a very long dagger. It's kind of that middle space between a sword and a dagger. I think that that's what they're going with. Now, there are some daggers in-game that maybe look a little bit like what we see on the image here. It really struck me of like those Sylvari, like Nightmare Court-y kind of weapons. Maybe some of the ones that came out on the gem store. I couldn't really find a great match though. Even though I've seen some fairly confident comments online that, oh no, it is this exact skin. Of course, if you could find the exact skin, then this entire debate would be put to rest because we would know, oh, it is exactly this dagger. I think it's probably something new, and precisely don't forget that they do, when you get an Elite Spec, it gets access to a new weapon category, and they give you a specific skin for it, that you have to do a collection or something for. That's one of the things that I hope that they improve even further on over the Path of Fire and Heart of Thorns implementations. There is that little bit of like shading and color on it. Which again reinforces Mesmer to me, but I don't know what else that could mean. That's my first look. I really do believe in the dagger thing. However, I can kind of see what people are saying with the spear. Like, if you look at where the character's wrist is, the wrist is bent up a bit, and it looks like there's something coming along. Now, but is that just like their glove? Is that just another ribbon from like their dressy thing? You can't really tell. And then over the shoulder, the idea is maybe that's the back of the spear. Spear would be really, really profound and really exciting because that is not a category of weapon we can use terrestrially right now. And this has been one of the big theories and one of the things that even from the very original wave of Elite Specializations in Heart of Thorns, I think many of us thought would be quite an intelligent thing for the studio to do, because if they did the underwater weapons now coming above land, they already have a really good baseline of a ton of different skins and even legendaries that pre-exist and players can now use. There are spears and stuff integrated in loot lists all around the game. It's less work to take one of these underwater weapons and make it a land thing than it is to implement an entirely new weapon like a scythe or like a great axe or whatever. And then there's a ton of other problems with scythes, for example, because so many staves look like scythes at this point, which they'd have to hand wave. So anyway, yeah, spear would be a really, really radical fundamental shift. If the devs have actually gone ahead with that very lofty ambition for End of Dragons, if they've gone to do that, then I do think it's credible the very first Elite Specialization they'd show would be wielding a spear, because they'd want to have it as exciting as possible. For what it's worth, Mesmer was the last one. Wait, was Mesmer? I think Mesmer was the last one they revealed from Core as well. So having it as the first one on End of Dragons is kind of interesting. So yeah, is it a spear? I have to say I'm probably like 70-30. No, I'm even higher than that. I'm like 75% it's a dagger. 25% that it's a spear. That's my honest gut. As excited as I would be for spears, and as much as I know we've talked about it, I don't know whether that's really what they're doing here. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. Don't worry. Dagger, I actually think, is a brilliant fit for Mesmer. Now, you might say... Actually, I read one of you guys said this in my comments. Said that you were quitting the game and never coming back if it was going to be another melee Mesmer. Because they just did Axe. And if you look at Chronomancer with Shield, you can kind of think of that as a melee thing if you like. Personally, I think that's a really silly way of thinking of the combat system. But there you have it. The thing is, if they did dagger, it wouldn't necessarily be a melee dagger. I actually think we'd go to a ranger dagger offhand situation where it's like a throwing knives type thing. That combat style and theme matches perfectly with the region of the world that we're about to go to in this expansion. So I think it's a mid-ranged throwing knives type Mesmer that uses dagger main hand. Dagger just on its own is something I always expected to be a part of Mesmer, even at core, but instead the Necromancer got dagger, and in exchange the Mesmer got greatsword, and I always felt like those had kind of been swapped just for the fun of it way back at core. Well, Necromancer then was bestowed its greatsword in Heart of Thorns. The Mesmer's still been waiting for its dagger, so I just think it's really, really perfect, especially the range idea. Another little story that people have been discussing is like which hand it's holding the dagger in, so is it main or offhand? And especially another debate was like the angle that the dagger is being held at. Does that mean it's a spear? Because actually in game when you hold daggers, it would be flipped. They'd have it the other side. So is it a double dagger? You know, it's actually a blade on both sides. Or is it, you know, actually this is proof it's a spear? I think that those final arguments I just sort of glossed over don't even really matter because this is concept art. The specifics of how things would be posed in game don't matter at all. And, you know, some people even went through all the skins in the game and said, here are the daggers that are actually sort of held in the opposite way. As if that couldn't be changed with a whole new elite specialization. It's concept art, guys. And in fact, I think it's concept art. To me, when I looked at this, it felt vaguely familiar. And I have a brilliant comment we're going to go to in a second, where I think someone's identified exactly why it feels familiar. I think this is concept art that's been specifically crafted to look like something we've seen before. Now let's talk mechanics. I've picked Charlie Dominguez, who says, the image, in my opinion, is the silhouette of a Mesmer Elite Spec. My guess of the weapon is dual daggers. I don't know whether we need dual necessarily, given that the shape of what the character is holding seems similar to a dagger, with the other being pointed towards us possibly, and that Mesmers in-game do not have access to that. If continuing with this idea, the magical effects being depicted could be flying magical conjured daggers that fire from a distance similar to Elementalist Earth Scepter 2 skill Rock Barrier. Playstyle speculation, emphasis on mid to long range DPS, with bleeding being one of the main conditions. New skill type she would receive would be Phantasm or clone based conjure weapons. Now I kind of picked this comment because your example on the Elementalist there I think is really, really smart. Back at launch you could tap that button over and over again to throw more and more rocks out. Nowadays they just all get thrown out at once, but I didn't see anyone else give that very fun example. So, I think this is really the other side of the story, how it works. I've seen a lot of people suggest spirit weapons might work. We were actually talking about this concept. I think I've had conversations with Boots about this concept a long time ago. I don't know if I really see the whole spirit weapon idea from this image, if only because I feel like if they did spirit weapons, you'd get an arsenal, you'd get a variety of different weapons. They wouldn't just all be spirit daggers. You'd be able to have like some variety in there. And yet above the character's head, we see 5 weapons that all are around the same shape. I mean, maybe it would be a thing where you can toggle into different kinds of things, but I don't think it's that. I think it's all about this dagger idea. I think it's the throwing knives thing. I think the bleeding works well. We even see that Ranger has that there, and you know, whether the devs are actually making elite specs to specifically be a Condi elite spec or specifically be a power elite spec or specifically be healing, I don't know. I think they throw a bunch of things in a bucket and see what happens most of the time. What I will say is the recent re-emphasis of Condi versus power is possibly making space for people to be hungry and have an appetite for power once End of Dragons comes out, and therefore they'd be really excited about this being a power thing more than anything else. But I think what we're looking at here is not necessarily utility skill, which is what I think a spirit weapon style thing would be. It's the main profession mechanic, and as several of you guys have kind of circled about, I think what they're going to do is change you know how you get 3 dots above your character right now? I think that's going to become 5 dots. And you see the 5 weapons that are up there? Those are your 5 dots, right? And now when you shatter, what you're doing is throwing these phantasmal knives out. Like those shatter buttons, mind rack, diversion, all of those, they're going to be reconfigured into this kind of theme. And maybe what they're doing therefore is really messing with the idea of how clones work. I'm thinking along the lines of, you know how like a clone is essentially when you shatter, it rushes from where it is into the target and then triggers its effect. Well, imagine the clone is a knife. It's going to rush out from wherever it is, maybe that's just you, to then impact the target. You know how Chrono has a trait that gives them all super speed, so they're all a bit faster? Imagine just really, really, really leaning into that kind of interaction. And the whole class is about getting new knives and how we utilize them. Maybe some buttons throw multiple knives at once. And this is exactly something I talked to Boots about recently. When you do that, what you've done is really change up a lot of the core class as well, and in a lot of interesting ways, because now all your Phantasm and clone generation from everywhere else is being retooled. Look at a trait like Shatterstorm, which gives mind rack ammunition, and now think about that paired with this like ammunition dagger thing. So that's really where my money is on this one, and that's why I actually think the most interesting thing to look at is the stuff above the character's head. Now, I will go back to the spear thing one final time. Why do I have 25% on the spear? Well, think about this. Everything I just said doesn't actually require main hand dagger. I mean, it would pair nicely, but it doesn't require that. I mean, that whole throwing knife theme and like phantasmal, like conjured clone kind of, you know, ephemeral knives, that's all being done without the main hand even really being relevant. So could they then pair that with a spear? I don't see why not necessarily, unless they're going for a really, really, you know, tight-fisted idea where everything is really, really well integrated. So yeah, those are my thoughts, and many of you guys had similar ideas in the comments. Okay, last but not least, I have this message from JM, who's talking about the concept art thing. So, they say, as many of the comments already talk about, my comment feels like it's going to be a drop in a larger ocean. I also agree that the elite spec hinted here belongs to the Mesmer, who strangely enough doesn't have daggers as a weapon. After doing some dredging, just like with the Iron Fist concept from a while ago, I came across this image of Master Reiko from Guild Wars 1's Winds of Change, which bears a striking resemblance to this silhouette, and they've got a link to it. Even down to the frills around the neck and the short skirt ending in tendril-like tails. Minister Reiko is also coincidentally a Mesmer with dervish emotes for some reason. That last comment in parentheses there makes it very clear you were on the wiki page a second ago. So, yeah, let me throw up this image here. This is Reiko. Now, we mentioned earlier in the video the idea that it could be a descendant of Shira. Now, that's fun, and I think that that could be a component of the story at any point. However, more specifically, I think this character here, if we are going to be talking about the character, and this concept art is styled after Minister Reiko. Maybe this is the new face of the Ministry of Purity as it now exists, whether they're still villains or what's going on there, and they kind of have styled themselves after this character from the first game. I think so many people watching this video won't have played Winds of Change and don't really remember Winds of Change very well. Even myself, I don't remember Winds of Change that well because I only played it the once. But the truth is, it was a big bridging story between Guild Wars 1's Cantha and Guild Wars 2. I think that the End of Dragons devs are going to have played it and are going to be interested in the subject material brought up there and will want to pay off on it. So the idea that back in Guild Wars 1 we fought Reiko as like the final boss, and she was a Mesmer, and she did all this stuff, and she was actually hinting at some Guild Wars 2 mechanics at the time. I think the whole idea of like how clones and stuff worked in Guild Wars 2, she was kind of emulating in the original game, which was nice. Now, I think we're going to get a kind of a new twist on that, where this new character is the new Mesmer Elite Specialization, and it's something to do with Reiko. Because, I mean, look at the comparison there between the skirty stuff at the bottom. I completely see that. The whole pose of the character, I think it's new concept art that's been styled to look a little bit like that. Which brings me to my final weird little speculation. Now, this isn't something that I've seen people talking about, but if you go along with the Reiko idea, and you think about how the art above the silhouette is kind of like a prominent, almost like 2D image looking thing, you know the class that does that a lot of? Well, that's Revenant. So maybe there's a little bit of space that this is a Revenant whose legend is Reiko. So it's kind of a mesmery feeling Revenant. And, you know, you can say that that's a Revenant with a dagger if you like. Or you can still go with the spear idea if you want. And perhaps that's what we're really seeing. If they're doing a rug pull, if they're doing a double bluff, I think it's that. I'll note as well that the original Mesmer reveal, the silhouette was completely wrong, and they revealed it to be the Bard was the class, and then a few seconds into the Bard singing you a song, the whole thing shattered, and it turned out it was illusion cast by Mesmer. It was a big, like, April Fool's thing. It was very, very, very good. And that's what they're referencing at the end in Kershore, but now I'm kind of in Let's Play mode, so we won't do that. Thanks very much for watching, guys. That's today's End of Dragons Daily. We're going to have loads of thoughts and feedback and response on this, undoubtedly. So tomorrow, we'll continue to be on this topic, and then we'll move on to talking about Xingji and all that other stuff. So thanks very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Please feel free to support the video in any way you like. I'm kind of watching this one closely because really what I could have done is done like a more clickbaity, you know, normal themed video just around all these topics, but I decided to keep it a part of this series, and I'm wondering if that's a mistake or not. So let me know, and I will see you for more next time. Take care now, guys. See you soon.